All right. So, welcome to Wyckoff Sundays, episode 6. We are 6 weeks into doing this. All right. So far, really proud of the series, right? We've really killed it with the higher time frame analysis, pretty much across the board, right? Getting really good setups on a lot of different pairs, right? So, today we're going to first start off going into last week. Last week was a killer week. Anybody who was on the live streams managed to catch some pretty insane moves, on a lot of the things that we spoke about, which is awesome, which is really awesome to see. All right. So let's go ahead and start out. So first thing we spoke about was a US dollar for our bias. Right. So one of the things that we were looking at for dollar was really obviously for price to continue to head to the upside. Right. So, we had seen this institutional candle earlier on one of the Wyckoff Sundays episodes. We saw that price tap back into that candle. And, we ended up taking buys to catch this reaction to the upside. So we were looking for that to continue. We had created relatively equal highs at the top. We had just barely swept, but relatively equal. And at the top here on the lower time frame, we created very equal highs there as well. So basically, when we went into the lower time frame here, like 4 hour, we spoke about the potential to see the market trade back into these areas, right? Mostly down in there, to go ahead and see, another impulse higher from that area. I think we did draw up a box as well. Yeah, so this box right there. So we were looking for that zone to go ahead and get hit for us to go ahead and look for long positions. We also said it would probably happen pretty quickly. And yeah, pretty much like we had our crystal ball out for that, because, as we can see here, right? As soon as the market opened, right after that moment there on Wyckoff Sundays, as we can see here, this is where we were, right? Pretty much right after open, we gapped a little bit, and then we came down, sweeping through those lows and just barely tapping into that zone right there. And then really just seeing price, react from that very aggressively, right? So I really did like how that happened right at the beginning. Obviously, personally, I didn't position because I normally don't really trade on Sundays. I don't like to trade Sundays. Typically, it's a lot more liquidity generation before like real moves happen during the week. So that's like typically what I say. But obviously, things can happen like this, where right at open we move right into zones that we wanted to see happen. Like later on in the week, right? So be it, right? But yeah, really went ahead and saw a really clean reaction to the upside from that area. And so then pretty much we'll talk about, throughout the week, we ended up looking for longs inside of these positions, right? So we saw like distributions happen here. So we like tried to buy below distributions at first. We did manage to catch some really nice moves on GU, for example. We had like a really big 1 to 7 risk to reward trade happen closer to the beginning of the week. And it kind of stuck, right? Like in terms of sorry, it didn't stick, right? So we did end up having price come lower after that reaction, and then we positioned ourselves for some banger longs on dollar here. And again, we didn't really stick, right? We came right back down, and we'll talk about what we can potentially see coming later on in the week. But that's how things pretty much resulted for us playing out that higher time frame bias. We did manage to catch 2 clean buys. They didn't end up being long term. We did not see these highs get taken. So yeah, we'll see what ends up happening later on in the week. All right. Then we have USD currency analysis, right? So obviously we spoke about, one of the main ones that we managed to take advantage of was GU. So I don't know. Yeah, right here.
Institutional candle there at the top. That could end up
We were
being a
talking
good
about
area
this
for us to
institutional
sell
candle.
from. All right. But again, it's like relative to EU, it's just I just sell from.
So
All right.
I think
With
we
dollar,
boxed it up. So yeah, we
which
boxed up
is
that
like for
zone
us to
on
kind of look for
EU.
distributions for dollar.
So this push to the upside here, right? We were thinking, all right, maybe we could see reactions down from there. And, as we can see here, right, that's pretty much what we tapped into before having a push down. Now, again, we also spoke about the liquidity above, could still have some potential of seeing that, get taken. We might even have like a big move up to then, again, later on, give us some sell-offs back down, right? That could be the case. We'll see, right? But that's that for, EU and then GU. I don't know where oh yeah, here we are, right? So we spoke about this zone here on GU, right? And so obviously that lines up right here with what ended up happening last week, right? So, sorry, 1 second here, guys. Oops. Okay. All right. So, yeah. So from there, all right, we ended up seeing the market pretty much like buy up pretty aggressively into that area. So this is where we were on Wyckoff Sundays. Market bought right up into this 4 hour candle right here, right? And then we see the market obviously from there, like trade up into there, sell off, and then we ended up catching the follow up right around here for a nice risk to reward play at about a 127 risk to reward, which was beautiful, right? So love to see that happening for us on GU. And again, like that sell off there, we also aligned with on AU, which we didn't talk about on Wyckoff Sundays, but we definitely did find a trade there, which was right here, right? We caught a nice 1 to 9 at max, right? I did end up closing out most of my position, and then the rest of it got stopped at break even. So those were nice plays, again, just based off of the dollar and currency analysis that we were saying, right? For the week, right? Then we spoke about gold and silver, right? Really just saying that, again, like we did catch buys that week. We were saying that we wanted to see the highs continue to get broken and just see us break into, again, like some bigger zones, right? And obviously we did see that happen. So market opened, we gapped, came up, we reaccumulated, right? Buys in this area made a lot of sense. And then again, now we have this push to the upside here. So we'll talk about what we could see happening in the future with gold, but pretty good, reaction from last week, right? Which I do love to see. All right. So yeah, now here, silver, same thing, right? We already spoke about, right? Just continuing to boom. US 30, we had this zone down here, right? We really did see price get into that zone pretty nicely. And react beautifully, right? Some people did catch buys from here, right? Pretty much swept these equal highs though, and then we saw a huge sell-off back down. So again, we'll talk about what we could see happening in the future for indices. I do think we'll finally see that sweep that we've been talking about for a while. Crypto-wise, we were talking about the potential to see buys from here if it did hold this low. If not, we also spoke about the fact that there could be a redistribution from that high, which basically is exactly what ended up happening there with BTC. So we did see the market go ahead and trade like down afterwards, and then we ended up catching a beautiful buy on Friday night for the news event that had happened, right? So yeah, right down in here, right? This is where we ended up buying because of the news event that we spoke about. So yeah, last week, great week, right? Really, really great week. Obviously, the potential continuation setup didn't happen there, but we did end up seeing the market, trade back down again. So we did call out the redistribution pretty well there, which was right around here, right? So to come into the top, we shaved some off, and then we saw the market go ahead and trade back down. So yeah, really beautiful stuff there, from this, right? Love to see that happen, with BTC, right? And now we're trading down. We'll see what ends up happening in some zones that we'll speak about later on. I think that we might get maybe more opportunities if we end up again like breaking above. But we'll see. We'll see. So yeah, good stuff. Now, next up, let's go ahead and talk about what we can see for the coming week. All right, guys. So before we obviously talk about this, right, we obviously need to speak about the huge news event that happened over the weekend, right? So obviously Israel and the United States have launched attacks on Iran. They did kill the supreme leader of Iran. So, really, obviously that is huge news, for what we were, talking about, because again, like that means that like there's greater implications that can come from that, right? Obviously, we don't necessarily know that it's a full-fledged war or anything, that is something that might last a while, but we definitely have had some pretty crazy things happening in terms of like even the Iran like sending missiles to other countries where there were US bases and stuff like that. So definitely a lot of crazy things happening in our world, right? And obviously that is, going to affect the market in a very big way, right? Which we're about to find out now in a couple hours exactly how the market is going to react to that. What I will, and obviously, for me, normally when there's big news like that, like not even just news like war, but just news in general, the smartest thing for me is always to watch and see what happens during that time, right? So, for me, I don't typically go in and like, jump in right when the news hits or jump in right before the news or like anything like that. I like to see the news hit, see the effect that the market is doing, what could be the incentive of the market, and then from there go ahead and look to see where we can have our positions happen, right? So for me personally, guys, I'll probably be staying away from the market at open personally, right? That's just again like because that's just my personal precaution. Because like again, like I've already, for me, it's more about capital preservation than it is about making money. Is there going to be potentially big volatility happening? Yes, but I also think there's going to be a lot of manipulation that's happening given the amount of retail eyes that are going to be in the market. So I would say wait for a clear setup. There's going to be a clear manipulation setup that will present most likely. And when that happens, do it, right? I wouldn't really do it off of, open or anything like that right away. Like because there could be moves coming in one direction and then reverse quickly in the other, that then reverse quickly in the other, right? Whatever, your long-term move you think happens is, which is, for example, like obviously everybody thinks gold is going to be bullish, right? Obviously everybody thinks risk like things like indices are going to be bearish, right? Because that's typically what typically the effect that war has on the market is we end up seeing the market, obviously gold skyrocketing, dollar skyrocketing, risk on assets like indices, like, sometimes crypto, which has its own exceptions, end up going to the downside, from that, right? And so, yeah, like for me, that's kind of my thought process with it is like again like we might see that long-term move happen and I do agree with a lot of those things, but at the same time you got to understand that we're leverage trading right now, right? We are not like, we're looking for precision inside of our entries, right? Because that's what leverage trading is about. We're not like swinging like, long drawdowns most of the time with leverage trading, right? It's not really what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to get precision inside of our entries. And so, you know, we got to understand that yes, like while we know the long-term direction, we have to actually find opportunities that are again very high risk to reward, right? Because again, like even though we might know the long-term move, it's like okay, we also need to know exactly when that's going to happen, though, right? It's not about like okay, yeah, I know long-term, for example, like stocks are going to go up or down or whatever, right? But you also need to go ahead and be wise in terms of like where your entries are going to be because there's this famous quote that says the markets can stay irrational a lot longer than you can stay solvent, right? The markets can stay irrational a lot longer than you can stay solvent, right? Meaning that, even though you think gold might have to go up, it doesn't have to go up right now. And it can still complete the same idea as what you were already thinking, right? And so that's why I would say approach it with caution. I'm not saying that, it's not going to happen. But what I am saying is that I feel like the market has kind of trained people to like buy off open a lot of times, like especially gold when it was rallying. It was like gold would open, gap up, boom, and then we wouldn't even fill the gap. We would just continue to buy. And then next week, another gap up, boom. We would just buy, 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 buy. And it was just gapping and gapping. I think people are trained to think shit only goes up and that, things are sweet in the market, right? And they're not. Right. Like we have to kind of give that respect to the market and just be like, look, like literally anything can happen. Like if we all of us right now on this call, if all of us right now on this call understand that the market is manipulated, right? We understand that the market is not necessarily a fair environment at all, right? Then why are we going to go all in on one position? Or why are we going to, like just trust that the same thing that happened before is going to continue to happen, right? Understand that literally anything can happen, like literally anything, right? Because, again, it's manipulated. It's not fully real, right? You know what I mean? Like at least the price during one day versus another. I mean, what difference does that really make to the banks and institutions for the most part, right? It doesn't really make much of a difference if instead of going up today, gold goes up tomorrow, or gold goes up on Tuesday, or gold goes up on Wednesday, before first dropping like five, like 1,000, 2,000 pips. You know what I mean? First, and then after that, later on, we just boom it 5,000 pips, right? Like it doesn't really matter too much. And so, like, I understand the market is manipulated. We do understand that, right? And we've already been rallying for a while now on gold as well, right? So why can't a pullback happen before we then go ahead and create that new move, right? Definitely could, right? Granted, this is really big news. So, like I said, for me personally, I'd rather stay out, right? That's personally how I want to play it. So I just want to preface that with the news is like obviously these the market will push in that direction most likely in the longer term. But again, we just want to be careful with our entries, be careful with our risk, be careful with our stop losses, and make sure we have them in place because we want to have room for ourselves to be wrong and room for ourselves to be wrong where we're not going to be devastated after being wrong because it's totally natural to be wrong, especially inside of a market environment that, like we said, is not fair. It is literally manipulated, right? So don't go all in on anything, don't necessarily just think, oh, market went up, that means we're going to keep going up. That's exactly how they want you to think, right? So all I would say is just, yeah, again, wait for your setups. People are going to get manipulated at one point or another, right? They're not going to want everyone to just, if everyone clicks buy, I guarantee you it's not going to go up. Like I guarantee it because there's not going to be money there to pay out the buyers, right? So yeah, so that's kind of what I'm saying there, right? We'll see how things end up playing out, but cool. So now on dollar, all right? So let's talk about what we can see going in, price action wise, right? Obviously now we're kind of limited because we don't really have price action with the effect of, in terms of like with the effect of what happened with Iran necessarily like priced into it. But that being said, we'll do our best, right? So obviously, last week, we wanted the market to go ahead and go for, whoops. Wanted the market to go ahead and go for these highs here at 98, right? Market did not do that, right? We did have this sweep, right? We did have price even coming back into the sweep and getting some good reactions. But so far, really, no follow through, for that move that we wanted to go ahead and head towards like 98.5, 98.6, and see if we can get sales out of this area. If not, it might even be just like, again, like we said, we've been playing with the idea for a bigger time frame accumulation. So maybe we end up getting that first, and maybe we even see like 102 come into the market next, right? But, seeing dollar here and seeing how we just kind of ranged all week, it was very much so like didn't make any real decision at all, right? So for me, my long-term bias is still going to be bullish, right? For me, the news only furthers that idea, right? And so it's probably going to end up happening, right? We could even end up seeing this off rip gap up and see a lot of these things like, sell off and stuff. In which case, things like GU, things like AU, things like GU from last week, would probably continue in our favor. And yeah, I just do find that kind of interesting because, I feel like right before market closed last week, we already kind of like made moves as if we knew what was going to happen, which probably they did, right? But that's what I'm saying is like they kind of made moves like as if they already knew exactly like what was going to happen next inside of the market, right? So I feel like because of that, you know, um, really with me, like I'm looking to again be like just kind of cautious when it comes to it. I don't want to see the market like really like because again we could see those pullbacks happen because we might have already priced in some of what we could see happen, right? So even with dollar, I mean, we're already primed to go bullish. Like it would make perfect sense for us to go bullish. We already had this happen the week before, right? So maybe we just end up getting a sweep on the lows from last week, right? So the low of the week last week is right here. It's possible we get a sweep and then we continue to go. That would be my most ideal opportunity. If not, it's possible, honestly, that we just gap at open and we see us just absolutely boom it to new highs on dollars. So personally, I'm still going to be bullish coming into the new week, right? Most ideal scenario, getting below 93 to then give us new long opportunities. If not, then the long opportunities that we were thinking from last week will probably hold and just continue to go into new highs from there. So those are the two real main scenarios I see. I don't see dollar coming any lower than 96.42, right? So I do think that this low here is the low in the market, right? Before we end up seeing, again, new highs up into here, right? So again, maybe we do end up getting a sweep out. We take this low, we take that low, right? Get into an extreme area. And then from there, we can end up seeing the new buys happen. That would be my most ideal scenario. If not, then again, hopefully, again, these just hold and then they just boom from there. That could end up being the play, right? So that's kind of my thought process with dollar. Maybe a sweep down to the downside, right? Get a quick sell off first, and then from there, go ahead and buy longer term, right, on these ideas. So we'll see, right? Only time will tell when it comes to this. All right. And when it comes down to it with dollar again, we are already kind of set up to align with what the news had said in the first place, right? So let's take a look at some dollar pairs and see what we could potentially see happen. So here when I look at EU, right, if we were to look for dollar longs, we would look for EU short. And right now, EU, I mean, like, yeah, dollar longs, EU short. Right now, EU has just got built up so much liquidity, right? Like I see over here, definitely liquidity there from EU, right? Maybe we hold that up for now, and then later on we end up buying it back up. So that could definitely happen. But my preferred idea for getting into shorts would be for us to actually break through at least these highs. And since it's not only these highs, but there's also these highs and there's also these highs, I would love to see the whole thing just get swept, right? And then we end up getting the next drive down, right? Holding this zone there. That would be really my most ideal opportunity. In which case, who knows? Maybe dollar doesn't hold this low here, right? Because again, this relative low here is, sorry, it should be over here, right? This relative low here is this relative high here on dollar. Sorry, this relative high here on EU, right, is the same as that relative low on dollar that we were saying could hold. But again, only time will tell when it comes to this one. But again, when I see liquidity above, typically I want to see price go ahead and just swipe that before we actually end up getting the next move, bearish, right? So we'll see how that ends up going there. That's what I'm seeing there with EU. All right, let's go into GU if we can. So yeah, so GU here, pretty much like we have a beautiful redistribution in my opinion, right? This is exactly what we expected to see on Wyckoff Sundays. Price trade up into that 4 hour candle. We created a new institutional candle, sold off, right? We created a trap candle, and then we ended up having our entry last week there with GU, right? Right after that trap candle. So really beautiful move there with this, right? Again, stops just above the previous order flow and stuff. And personally, I think this can continue, right? Again, maybe we just see EU take out some short-term highs, and then that would bring dollar maybe back up into that area. That would be really what, again, would be most clean for my scenario. Personally, I did end up taking a lot off at this low because we did have an accumulation here, but I do see equal lows here as well. So it's like we should see the market go ahead and trade towards those equal lows before we were to see any type of reversal. So that's kind of what I'm thinking, right? Maybe off open, we just gap down through that low, but I'm kind of thinking that, maybe we end up getting a pullback, I hope, right? Again, this is just kind of like my ideal scenario to just align with the higher time frame bias. But like even just looking at this, like it kind of makes me laugh how, again, like we have equal lows and we have the market reacting so big off of those lows. Like if we were to go ahead and just like gap down to here, all those people's stop losses, like if they had their stops here, just get gapped like double, triple, right? So I do feel like that can still happen, to be honest. Like with this, right? Like I wouldn't be surprised to see the market just open up and end up just being a dump down through, right? Again, only time will tell there. If we do end up seeing that, then perfect, right? We'll end up, seeing, sorry, like another put, like we'll end up seeing like the runner that we have like still go through, or we'll end up seeing the market trade back up, and then we can take maybe even another position to add on, right? We'll see. We'll see how that goes. That's that for that. Okay. And you, all right. And you, when it comes to the sellouts, didn't really happen too aggressively. We had the accumulation hold so far, right? So price selling off, coming back up, right? Breaking through new highs, right? Selling off and such, right? And we do have our higher time frame zone sitting up here. Personally, I did want to see price get below here because we were like ranging it for so long, but instead we did accumulate. But maybe what could end up happening if we just align with that dollar buy bias would be for the market to go ahead and trade up into there and then go ahead and dump through, for things like NZD USD. So that's kind of my zone there. See us break above here one more time. We'll end up getting a 3 drive push up at that point, right? Looking like a Wyckoff schematic. And then we'll see the new low end up getting created there on NZD USD. Okay. So now we have NU. And let's look at what else. USD CAD, right? So before market close, we did have these relatively equal lows here. Sorry, equal highs. The market had a big sell-off that then bought back up. I expect us to react off of this area. Might even happen right there, right? But basically, guys, like I'm looking for USD CAD to continue to go ahead and give another rally up to the upside. And I really don't think we'll break down below here, right? So again, like all these things are primed to just buy at open, to be honest. Like even with USD CAD like sweeping below lows like that before open, that could be the case, right? USD CHF saw very similar price action, right? We had a buy idea here that didn't end up, we did end up closing early. We did get good initial reactions from it, but again, like didn't end up playing out. But then again, price did end up creating more liquidity here after that, right? So I do think there's liquidity here. I think there's liquidity here, and I think we're getting into an extreme area here, right? Most ideal scenario for me would be for price to drive below these equal lows here at about 0.7665, and then from there look to see if we can get the next long opportunity, based off of that, right? Don't expect this low to get taken. So if we do go ahead and drive below there, that could end up being a good stop for us to go ahead and attack these highs, and probably that high as well, right? So only time will tell when it comes to you, Chef. But I do like that, right? Again, like price selling off so aggressively, and then we get news like that's super dollar bullish. I mean, I don't think that that's a coincidence. Okay. Here with UJ, we had price give a really nice sell off from here, right? And then we got a second one, but price didn't break this low. So this kind of does look really bullish for UJ. It does look like we might have had a reaccumulation happen here, bigger time frame wise, where we have a distribution again, turns into an accumulation with this big sweep all the way down, right? So nice little reaccumulation idea. And the market goes back, trades into it, and comes back up. So I do kind of think that, again, we have dollar buy ideas coming here, right? Personally, I would want to see price get below this low here, right? Give us a reaccumulation, right? Maybe we end up tapping back into this level there. And, if we do hold order flow, that would be the zone. If we want to come into the more extreme area, then obviously this is the most extreme area. And yeah, we'd probably expect this low right here to hold at 152 flat, right? I don't think we should get below there. So hopefully, again, just driving here and buying or driving here and buying, for us, right? And overall 152 should hold as a whole. All right. From there, what else do we got? GU, EU, NU, AU. I think we talked about AU, but yeah. Again, AU we ended up seeing sells from, right? Market bought back up, and we've been reacting since off of this distribution, right? That we also, again, we see big institutional candles here, big institutional candle there, right? And then coming back into and creating a distribution. I mean, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it could be that we do end up seeing price sell off aggressively there, right? We do have relatively equal highs here, right? A little odd. But nonetheless, it's all good. Still looks decent. To see if we can potentially continue to see sell-offs back down for this, right? So if this accumulation turns into a distribution, could be the case. And again, that's just following my bias. But what I will say, out of everything, AU looks the most bullish, right? Meaning like if I were to look for the dollar sells, AU would be the one I would look for. And I would look for it down here, right? Where this previous accumulation happened. But, as of right now, I think the sells are the most likely scenario, right? So that's that for dollar pairs. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you guys so far. Now we're going to go into metals. All right. So metals here, we last week was interesting. We definitely reaccumulated, right? And we kind of had that idea ever since here. We just wanted to see price retest into the zone. Never happened. But yeah, we pretty much again have a distribution that happened here. Definitely looked like, and then we had imbalance and stuff. So it definitely looked like we could see lower. And then when the market traded below here on Tuesday, right? We came down, we created this institutional candle, and then we started to trade our way back up, right? So, for me, this push to the downside looks more like a sweep instead of a break in structure. Obviously, now that's confirmed because we did get a huge buy from that level, right? And yeah, I mean, like if we do end up seeing again, like Iran happen, like gold could potentially just boom, even up above like 5,500 and stuff like that. To be honest, I mean, well, obviously we did see that happen, right? But I do think that's the long-term target, like getting back up and above here. I think this is pretty bullish news for gold. But in terms of the how, tough to say, right? Honestly, we might just do it off rip, but again, like a pullback would be nice to go ahead and have that happen. But honestly, by the looks of this, again, like I said, like it's interesting how the market kind of reacted in this way because like we kind of already we did it in a way where it's like we were expecting that to happen. You know what I mean? Like on a lot of these pairs, like what we saw with USD Chef, with the sweep happening, with USD CAD, with the sweep happening, gold, where we already, started to again go in that direction. I wouldn't be surprised to see this just continue. So personally, that's going to be my idea, right? Just be careful, like again, because we do gap or whatever, and then you try to look for the continuation buys from the gap, and then price comes back and fills the gap, you're cooked, right? You're cooked. So just be careful, right? That's all I'm saying, right? Definitely there are some big opportunities that could happen. But I do think that most likely, honestly, we probably will see a gap happen on gold and just continue the momentum that we already, kind of had, right? It does look like we kind of priced in, again, like that was going to happen almost. So it is interesting, right? I do think that buys that we still have from here could potentially just continue to boom. I didn't reposition here last week. Well, actually, I did, but I goofed and I closed it right here. Because I was happy with my trades for the week. I was at a 1 to 2 or something. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna close out, and then we just ripped through. So it would have been nice to have been in that, now knowing what the news was and stuff. But again, it is what it is, right? Sometimes we just get more conservative when we already have wins, right? But yeah, cool. So that's gold, right? Really just seeing it boom, right? Seeing it just go through and continue, right? And then obviously, silver, same idea, right? We did have a decent reaccumulation, although with gold it was a lot better. What we can see is like I was kind of expecting us to go ahead and break below here so we could reaccumulate below these lows. Instead, the market just kind of swept this internal liquidity and continued to buy back up, right? So again, like if that did happen, then so be it. But like again, like if that does end up being the bottom, then so be it. Because again, I was wanting to buy, but we just didn't get the sweep on the lows that I really wanted. But really clean accumulation that happened here last week, right? That we did end up holding. And then we ended up seeing the market just trade up. So again, with silver, we have room. We have room to boom, right? We have even more room than gold. So I do expect this to gap as well. We'll see how it goes with gold and silver in terms of how much it gaps, but this looks great. Right? It does look good to just continue the trend. So yeah, that's that. All right, now indices. Okay, let's go into indices. So shoot, okay. So where is indices, US 30 and such? Do I not have them here? I have SPX here. Okay, yeah. So I mean, firstly, we look at like things like SPX. Um, like what is this? We have not yet broken above, right? We have not yet like seen like real huge drives to the upside or anything. We've been in a tough spot really for buyers. And so, truthfully, like I think that there is a scenario here where we do get a gap down on indices as well. I think we're already kind of set up for that on the bigger time frame. I think that there's potential that we do end up coming below previous lows here, right? Which again, like would end up meaning that basically this entire zone here that I've highlighted could be a distribution, right? And then maybe we do end up seeing the market come down, get below that distribution. It's possible we reaccumulate here inside of this low, or maybe we decide to go even deeper. Like who knows how long, that push to the downside could last. But all I know is like here, like when we look at this, like even look at the daily time frame, like huge institutional candle sitting right here on S&P 500, right? Coming back into previous highs, then engulfing back down. We have two bearish closes there. I mean, why wouldn't we see this just continue down, right? Because when we look at it to the upside, candles. When we look at it to the downside, wicks, right? And so for me, like seeing that, I mean, that's potentially all going to be liquidity for us to continue to come down. And so it's just kind of like, again, like, although we wanted to see the new highs, we wanted to continue to be bullish on indices, and we caught nice buys from that idea, it might not be the long-term move, right? It could be that again, like we are just going to look to clear out some retail buyers, right? And like, what a perfect moment to go in and do that, with the news that just came out. I think that's going to create a lot of fear, and what fear is going to create is a lot of sellers, right? And so I think a lot of people selling, will end up getting, like obviously wrecked long term when we do end up buying back up, and then they're going to be like, oh no, I lost my positions, and they end up closing at losses for no reason. But again, like I mean, if we do get like if this is really a big shift, I mean, imagine this would be crazy down to here, but not impossible at all. 20%, 20% drop. SPX, let's look at that. So now US 30. And then US 30 is just even worse. Like we've been talking about this trend line liquidity for a really long time. And it's been holding like almost too well, right? Like, I mean, like we've had order flow here, order flow there, right? To go ahead and like see that buy continue. But honestly, guys, like by the looks of it, like this is looking pretty bad. Like it does look like most likely at open, we will be getting a drive down, to go ahead and clear that up, right? In which case the next zone is here, right? To go ahead and look for bounces back, which could happen. But again, like we got to really let that push to the downside settle, and then we can start to buy again, see if we can find type threes or whatever. But yeah, I mean, if S&P were to do that, again, we could see US 30 like all the way down to here. And this isn't really that far. I mean, this is just a year ago, right? This is just tariffs. So it's like easily, like this could have all just been build up, and then the news comes out, and then we end up getting the sweep, and then we end up buying right back up. I mean, it's totally possible, right? In which case it is what it is, right? Now we have NASDAQ as well, right? And again, like all of them just looking sus, right? Like one of the reasons why I wanted to buy here was so that we could go ahead and have these highs here get taken. We saw that happen, and we saw it happen with an institutional candle, right? So again, like we had a huge sell-off back down. I mean, if we hold here, great. If not, honestly, we might even gap right through as well. On this again, it's like big buy up there on the 4 hour, right? Daily time frame as well. Big buy up. I mean, coming above previous highs, like that's pretty classic for redistributions. So maybe this accumulation just turned into a distribution there, and then we're going to end up seeing this drop to the downside and not follow the order flow that we were originally thinking. That's kind of the way it's looking right now. And again, just adding the news into that makes it look even worse, right? So I did partial out some more when we made that high, thankfully, because that was my target. But yeah, I mean, it could be the case. It could definitely be the case that we've just been building up buyers, building up buyers, building up buyers. And that's kind of what it looks like across the board. S&P building up buyers, right? US 30 also looks like it's just been doing that. If I can find it. Okay, whatever. I'll go to my one here. Like US 30 more than all of them just looks the worst. Like this is awful, right? So at minimum, I do feel like looking for 47,000 as a target, and then maybe after that we can buy, but it might even go deeper. So definitely be careful and just look for your right setups and have proper risk. If you decide to buy here, there is imbalance, right? There is a manipulation. It is like we're going to be sweeping liquidity if we do get down there. So there's a lot of good things about this zone. But that being said, use your risk management and all of that. But yeah, like I said, this could be a zone for us, right? This would be zone number one if we aren't going to get like a huge, crazy sell off like with tariffs. Then this could be the zone that we just kind of buy out from naturally. If not, then this could be insane all the way down to here. But that's really as far as I see it going. Like I don't see it going crazy, crazy far, like back to 2022 lows or anything. I think we hold this. But only time will tell. Only time will tell. But it is not looking good for the indices. Not gonna lie, guys. And again, like I said, it's just interesting how all this happened prior to the news even being released. Institutional candle there, like all this stuff that aligns with that news event happened before we even announced it, right? So this is typically how it goes with major world news events, right? Is like when you look at it in hindsight, you're like, wait, this made perfect sense to react from this level or that level. It made perfect sense to see the sell off happen before the news was even released. I'm telling you guys, that happens a lot, right? So I would not be surprised to see this again, institutional candle, sell off, and we just continue to come to the downside. I would not be surprised to see that on S&P 500. So we'll find out in a few hours now, won't we? We'll find out in a few hours what will go down. All right. Now, last thing we're going to talk about is going to be crypto. All right. So obviously here we have BTC, right? We did manage to catch a beautiful buy here. Again, based off of this 4 hour institutional candle. So we did do a type 3 setup, coming down to here, right? And this was off of the news from Iran, right? So again, like this was right when they basically like announced it. Actually, where was it? It was right here, right? So a couple hours before, we're just slowly, steadily declining, and then boom, we get the news come out that they had the strike on Iran, and then boom, big push to the downside. Now, during the week, we went ahead and spoke about this area down here for potential buys, which was this imbalance on the 1 hour, 30 minute, right? We also had a 4 hour institutional candle sitting in that level on most feeds, at least, not on this feed. Let's go to another feed here. Wait, what? I know there was a 4 hour candle down there. Don't be lying. Maybe it was just on my broker. In which case, I guess let's look at that broker, which would be the Vantage one. Oh, I have to do that. BTC USD. Yeah, I mean, at least on Vantage, again, like we did have an institutional candle there at the bottom, and that just comes down to like different brokers having different candle closure times for BTC. It's not very standard what I've noticed with that. But I did have that 4 hour candle down, right? We also had a 2 hour candle down at the same time, right? We had the not really a 1 hour too much, right? But then when we got to the lower time frames, we saw like a really nice sweep happen there at the bottom, right, with this candle down there. So kind of interesting, right? That ended up happening, right? And so we then see the market go ahead and trade up, right? And again, like we did leave it behind, like the imbalance that happened right here, right? And so look at where we reacted from, right? Like a little too perfect, and like I literally like I have entries right here, right? So clean trade, right? Crazy move, right? We ended up buying up super aggressively. And for me, guys, I am still bullish on this, right? Now, this is the only thing that I'm going to say that goes against the kind of idea with war, because typically, again, with war, we end up seeing risk on assets go ahead and, go down, right? For me with BTC, I think it's going to be the opposite. I think we're going to end up seeing longs happen. I think that, again, like I said, things are already kind of set up in that way. I think that we have been building sellers for a long time. For me, this is liquidity, right? And we have been making it very difficult for buyers to, again, stay in the market, right? And the fact that we react off imbalances, I mean, imbalances are, really only filled when we have to see the market, when the market is very bullish. You know what I mean? Like, that's when we see reactions off of imbalances. And again, like just the fact that this push to the downside that happened here, right, happened right when the Iran war happened and then like right afterwards bought back up. I mean, for me, that's really good as a low, right? To be potentially like a low in the market. And so that's what I'm thinking is that potentially this zone here could potentially be a bottom in the market, right? And that now we're potentially going for a pullback, right? So I did take a lot of partials out of the position. One zone where I would really love to see price come back into would be this trap candle right here on BTC, right? It's possible we even just react inside of this imbalance, right? I might explore an idea there if we do get a nice setup in this zone. But if not, I do think that down here, this zone here on BTC will end up being really, really nice for us to go ahead and buy this bad boy back to the upside. So that's kind of my thought process here with BTC. It could even be, that it's happening now. Um, Not really looking too great by the looks of it, though. We do have like this big candle up there. If we like, that could be that we're just filling in balance. We do have a sweep here, right? I mean, maybe we hold that, but personally, I think that doesn't look great, right? We'll probably end up getting just a little bit lower, down into these levels. Maybe like when the market opens, we do end up getting like a sell-off. So if we do get like around like, if you guys look at the market at around like 7, 8 p.m., and then the market comes down to here, I do think that, seeing the next long, would be good for us. Right. So that's personally what I'm still thinking, right? Even here, when we look at the recent highs that just happened, we see equal highs, right? We see like perfectly equal highs between this high here, which is our previous redistribution, right? And that high right there, right? So I think that this, again, easy liquidity target, right? I think that the trend line to the upside is an easy liquidity target. And I do think that BTC has a good chance of this whole down move being a reaccumulation. And we're going to end up just absolutely wrecking through those sellers that have been collecting here over the last couple of weeks. So I'm personally really liking the setup here on BTC. Like, yeah, if BTC comes back to 65, we're going to look for long opportunities, right? Maybe even before then, depending on what price action does. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing so far, right? Um, if we do sweep below the low of this 4 hour and get down towards there, I mean, that would be nice. Maybe it would be actually the next 4 hour, to be honest, that we do see the buy come in. I feel like we can extend down during this current 4 hour candle. And then from there, the next candle can maybe be our bullish candle. We'll see. But yeah, I would like to see price again get below, get towards like 65, like you said, and then from there, go ahead and look for the buys to happen. I think that's what's going to make the most sense. So fingers crossed, right? Fingers crossed on that. To see if we do end up getting price getting towards the liquidity to the upside, right? And so also like just from a fundamental perspective, like why am I still looking for longs even though technically the idea is short? Well, the reason for that just being that, when we have extreme things like this happen, like, typically people do turn to BTC also, when it comes to an opportunity for them to have their money more safe than what they're currently in. Now, what am I talking about? Like in Iran, you know, if we end up seeing a fall of the regime, we'll end up seeing a fall in their currency, right? As we saw happen, already with Iran's currency, it was debased huge, right? Like I think it's like 60% down right now or something like that compared to where it was just before all this stuff started happening. So, like not right now, like when the war happened, but like even before when there was a lot of like civil unrest and stuff like that, ended up dropping like crazy. And so BTC was really helpful for people in situations like that, in times of war and stuff. Even like with Russia, when there was all these sanctions and all this stuff, right? BTC was a use that had a lot of use case for that. So I think BTC has a lot more use case and inside of war for people inside of those countries than what people realize, right? And so for me personally, like that's why I want to continue to follow up with that bias is like, again, like I think that even though obviously BTC is a quote unquote risk on asset for the most part, I think that with everything that we're seeing right now, like this could still end up being a good buy opportunity for us. And logically, I think it can still make sense from a fundamental perspective with the war. And regardless, from a technical perspective, I think it looks really good, right? We had this previous, super extended low that happened, right? Engulfment of that low. And then since then, we've just been ranging, sweep, push back out, come back. We actually see a rejection off of this zone. So now this is a clear type 1 setup, right? We took a type 3 here. This is now a type 1 because we have the previous zone here. We have price manipulating into that zone, coming out, right? Manipulating again into that zone. And now we're just looking to do the order flow to continue in through, right? So I personally am still bullish on this for that. Obviously BTC will go back. So somebody asked in the chat, do I think will BTC go up to 2025K one day? Is it going to happen from this low? Doubtful, right? But I do think we're due for at least a relief bounce from this, right? If this ends up being the bottom, great, right? Then maybe we go ahead and actually do go for that, right? It's fully possible, right? We had a sizable sell-off, right? We're back in a previous zone of higher time frame reaccumulation from before. So seeing price buy up from here would not be surprising at all. In terms of like even being long term, could be the case, right? But obviously, BTC is still long-term bullish, guys. Like, there's no reason why not. So it's a good place to DCA. But yeah, another thing that is possible, another scenario, is that here on the weekly, we have this big wick. It's possible this was just our climax. And then again, maybe we do end up getting a sweep out here, right? And then again, end up holding like the 50K level. So that's possible to happen again as well, right? But, with how things are looking, I'm down to take an attempt somewhere in here, right? Kind of looking to see the bottom be 63. And then from there, longing towards like these 71, 72K levels. If not, then we're going to look for price to, again, like if that fails, then price can come down to here, right? We look for, a reaccumulation down in this area, right? To go ahead and give us the idea like, okay, yeah, we can go ahead and see buys happen again on BTC, right? But guys, I'm still bullish on this asset. In terms of it happening right now, there's a chance the price action does show that it could happen now. But if not, then maybe we do end up sweeping off a rip with the open, and then the next week or later this week we end up getting the continuation buy up would be kind of what I'm thinking. So yeah, guys, that's really the overview for the week. All right. So honestly, we still haven't really changed our biases at all, right? Which is from the last couple of weeks, from the last 6 weeks, our bias has really been the same. Or for the last 5 weeks or so, our bias has been the same. And so now it's just about, again, like now the fact that we have this news event, the fact that this really happened, I think that it just furthers our point, right? I think that we've been seeing the signs of that over the time, right? And then now we're now getting the reason why we had those signs, I think. And then now we're going to get the moves really, really play out. So that's what I'm thinking. Again, only time will tell. We'll see what happens in 2 hours here now when the market opens. Exciting stuff. All right, guys, stay safe this week. Definitely increase volatility. Use your risk management. There's going to be big opportunities, but there's going to be big risks as well. So use your risk management. Give yourself the opportunity to take multiple attempts at things too. Like meaning trade safe inside of those attempts, right? Don't go big on one attempt and then, not really have the opportunity to be able to re-enter if another setup shows up, right? So just be careful. There's going to be a lot of manipulation. There's going to be a lot of volatility, which is a good thing for us, but also a reason why we need to be careful. All right, guys. So that's it for me for Wyckoff Sundays episode 6. All right, guys. Much love, much appreciation. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace out.